Peace and love, what up, though? What it do? What's popping? What's cracking? What's happening? And time 9, time 10. Back up in this piece, like their oil and not grease. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. It's gonna be a bit difficult, but I'm gonna make it do what it do based upon the fact that I'm standing on what I'm standing on, which is facts. I don't, comprehend how some of these content creators can come out here and just based off of something that they saw on TikTok or wherever, and do a light-handed type of research where they'll see some we'll just say I could say news articles or whatnot, but I really don't want to use that language because a lot of times that's not what it is, right? They don't search for reputable sources, right? I mean, anybody, me, you, him, her, the average person can, get on social media and say anything and not have to have any accountability for what they saying based upon the fact that if you're saying something about a particular celebrity as, the average person, that again, you don't have any LLC set up is not a way for them, even if it was a way for them to sue you, the same way that Cardi B sued Tasha K, is like, why would they waste their time? It's gonna, cost them some thousands, if not some hundreds of thousands, to even hire an attorney in order to put a lawsuit in motion against the average Joe Smo, if you will, right? So this is why, you see a lot of people getting away with, regurgitating information that is satire or, misinformation because they've been ill-informed, right? And didn't do their due diligence to check into that information to make sure that it was legitimate. Like if they see 2 or 3 or 4 other sites with the same information, at that point they come up under the assumption that, well, this information must be true. That doesn't make it true. You have to deal with a peer review and reputable sources, not just any Joe Schmo who, they don't even use their real names on these various sites. So, it would take somebody who's a celebrity or a politician to have to go through a lot of channels in order to retaliate against that by way of filing a suit. And again, it's typically not worth the time, if this person doesn't have any assets. You see what I'm saying? So I'll speak on that, and I want y'all to be very careful because I even see some of our elders and that many of us look up to falling for the banana in the tailpipe and regurgitating information that is not factual, right? It's just whatever it is, right? So again, be careful with what you repost and reshare and what you let get inside your head, and you can't stand on this shit. So, for me, my question would be, what's the purpose? Some of these things in particular, I'm not going to even bring up any particular topics, but a lot of people, some of the information may resonate with you based upon the fact that when you talk about the entertainment industry, I don't care if you're talking about music or sports or whatever it is. I'm going to change my music too because this kind of irritating. I didn't loop it properly the way it should be looped. But the beat is dope, but it's not looped, in a professional manner. So I'm going to have to mute it momentarily. But we're going to get through it for right now, right? So again, some of this information may resonate with us because, like I said, within the entertainment industry, what I learned long ago is the various, whether you're talking about fashion stylists or makeup artists, hairstylists, studio engineers, even producers, managers, role managers, A&Rs. Like I've heard, a lot of conversations. A lot of conversations back in the day came to me where they would, spread lies about various artists and athletes and actresses and actors or whatnot. And based upon the fact that these same individuals are within the same circle of some of these artists and athletes and people in the entertainment industry, you would tend to believe that what they are, telling you is factual when a large percentage of the time it is not. I've even been around other artists who may not be very big artists, and some of them, were big artists who listen to the stylists. You see what I'm saying? Listen to the former managers and A&Rs or whatnot, and then they will repeat certain information about, artists who may be bigger than them. Boxers in particular. I know a couple of famous boxers out of Detroit. I know a couple of famous basketball players out of Detroit. Some, made it. A couple of them got rings, some of them don't. But it seems to be a common factor involved, being that they will repeat things about other people in the entertainment industry to any and everybody, right? Without having any evidence about what they're saying, or reputable sources you're listening to. Again, and don't mistake what I'm saying for me trying to take up for various people within the entertainment industry. My thing is this: most of the people that I deal with, are adults. You're an adult, so I just put it to you this way: I have little to minimal to zero respect for people who just repeat shit that they heard without any. I don't It can be about the average person, it can be about your next door neighbor, right? But if you don't have any proof of this, then you shouldn't be saying it. And I also come from a place as to where there's been things said about myself that is false, right? Now some people would say, well, you shouldn't care. You shouldn't pay that any attention. If it's not true, it shouldn't affect you, and you should just ignore it, right? But it just depends on what it is, right? I don't care who said it. It just depends on what was said when it comes to me personally, right? As to whether or not I go looking for this individual to check. Because, like I said, most of these people don't have anything for you to, sue them for, right? Really, they don't. And with that being said, they hold zero accountability. They'll just regurgitate anything, and then it passes on and passes on. And in this current age of a technology or whatnot, things spread fast. Again, whether they're true or not, that's what you need to consider. If you are somebody who is a stand-up man or a stand-up woman, as we say in the hood, you shouldn't want to tarnish your own reputation or credibility by saying things that are false, right? And again, like I always remind y'all, this is the very reason, like, I don't have the biggest following, right? You know what I'm saying? People don't want to hear things that are true. You understand? They want to hear the things that are popular. And if you got any sense, you know that a lot of the things that are popular aren't necessarily true. A lot of the things that are being said that's popular aren't necessarily true, right? So again, look for reputable sources. Look for sources that they wouldn't risk or jeopardize their brand to say some fake shit. Now, when I say this, I want you to think about certain individuals, like, and I'll say a name for you, Jaguar Wright. She's been somewhat 50-50 with a lot of the things that she said on, people's platforms, right? Let's put it again. She's not a millionaire or a multimillionaire as to where a Jay-Z or Beyonce would come after them. But you see, when she got on a bigger platform, Jay-Z lawyer made them take that shit down, right? As you can see, he wasn't as far excuse me, as the Diddy case, he wasn't brought up. When the storytelling Eurasian woman tried to come out, and made those false allegations against Jay-Z and Diddy, saying that she was, what, 13 or 15, and she was somewhere she shouldn't have been, and they took advantage of her. Her own father came out and said, I don't recall that like that. There's no truth to that. And again, keep in mind, I'm not defending any of these people. My concern is based upon this. It used to be a small community that was the grassroots community of what we now call the conscious community, right? And currently, you have a lot of people who were not just not a part of that, because I'm not old enough to be a part of the original grassroots community when we start talking about a Dr. Francis Quest Welsing and a Dr. Ben, and I don't even say Phil Valentine, but although some of his information, and I got mad love for the elder, I done made mad money off of Phil Valentine. Again, I used to sell the conscious DVDs back in the day, and I would have a lot of elders come to me with VHS tapes of conscious information with lectures on them that they had, and they would depend upon me to convert them into DVDs. So, although I was aware of the information, as to where I wasn't dependent upon VHS tapes and DVDs, because it was a time again when you actually had to go out and purchase literature to get some of this information. You didn't have a YouTube, and it pains me to say a TikTok, because TikTok, as y'all know, I don't have a TikTok account. I've been pressured over the years to get a TikTok account. Many of my peers originally felt the same way that I feel about TikTok, and initially they didn't rock with it. But now even a couple of them have TikTok accounts and whatnot, which, as far as I'm concerned, is a good thing, because they get to try to do some damage control on the fake information that is at the top. It's at the top of the food chain. A lot of the information, again, that is spread throughout social media, the fake information, is at the top of the food chain, and those are the things that the people are attracted to. And for me, it's a deterrent. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it even depresses me, because I'll spend time rebutting false information, right? And look around, and 5 and 6 years later, people are regurgitating the same information all over again, right? So again, be careful with what you see online, what you already know, right? But again, when you try to verify this information, when you searching for a primary source of the information, make sure you're dealing with reputable sources, right? Not just he say, she say, right? Because at that point is merely something that's being alleged, right? Not necessarily true at all, or something that you can't prove. A lot of times we get stuck into situations that maybe we can't definitively prove that it's true or false. So we'll promote whichever end of the spectrum that resonates with us. And even in those situations, I'm going to say it to you, my brothers, my sisters, my gods, my goddesses, my emperors, my empresses, my queens, my kings, even though I know y'all don't like the word queen, right? And I don't care. Because like I keep telling y'all, as long as we are, or the majority of us are only speaking this modern English language, as far as the connotative meanings or whatnot of the words, like, if you're not bilingual, trilingual, or multilingual, like, really, you can't have no fight with me about what I say and how I say it. And you shouldn't, right? And from what I've learned over the years, we have to stop persecuting one another and aiming at one another based upon usages of certain words when we're using it in general usage. Even when you look in a law dictionary, for example, I'll pull something off the top of my head. When you look into the Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, specifically the 5th edition, you'll see a definition for elopement. We've always been taught or assumed that if a couple elopes, it means, and this is the general usage of the word, even the law dictionary points this out. In general usage, the word elope or elopement means that, two people went off and got married and they didn't have like this big wedding, or they, did it without the blessing. Another word I know y'all don't like, of their families or parents or whatever. But the meaning of the word, the actual meaning of the word within law, when you're talking about elopement, that the definition of that is a married woman who commits adultery with a man. And that's the short version of the definition of that particular word, right? But if I was speaking about a particular couple who went out and eloped, right? In your mind, you wouldn't be thinking of the lawful or legal definition of that term. You would be thinking, oh, they just went off. Maybe they went to Vegas, right? Maybe they went to Ohio. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to go. And here in Michigan, before you get married, they want you to go through a certain amount of counseling, and you get a marriage license after you all of that. In Ohio, you can just go to the court and get married and get a marriage certificate right there, Johnny, on the spot, unless they changed it in the last 15, 20 years or something like that, right? Similar to people who go to Vegas to get married, right? And that's why a lot of times couples who may go to Vegas or go to Ohio and get married, what they'll do is maybe their finances weren't up to par as to where they can afford to have the big wedding ceremony. And even after they're actually legally married, later on they'll do a big ceremony and reception and things like this and like that, right? So again, I'm using the definition of elopement as an example of what we're gonna get into this evening. And y'all know I'm not even supposed to be talking about what I'm talking about right now. I'm supposed to be talking about what the topic is, and I am gonna get to that because there's a lot of things that is this not a matter of me, of it being an abundance of pain that I want to get off of my chest, but in all honesty, this becomes like a diary for me. Therefore, my heirs and descendants can look back upon this and say, okay, that's why grandma such and such and such, or that's why mama such and such and such, or that's why great grandma such and such and such. Yeah, this is what we doing. And then as I get into some of these topics, starting from the beginning of my existence here on this mother plane, and this go round, all the way up until current times right now, and then I'll get into some things that I know, that I'll make some predictions as far as futuristic, right? So we gonna deal with it, rock with me, and again, help me out. For real, if you're gonna do anything, definitely, where's she at? I think I don't know, I'm about to see. Nope, okay, that's not it. Let me get to what I'm looking for, this particular photo. And it's here because I had it here earlier. Uh, where is that? Actually see it on the screen, y'all. I just got to figure out how I'm going to pull it up. I should be able to get it this time. So let me try it again. Yep, I got it this time. All right. So we're going to go back to before I passed through the vortex of my mother's womb, right? And we're gonna get to, I guess, why there are some things within life that I admit to being naive about because of a lack of experience. You see what I'm saying? Maybe on that particular topic. Peace, goddess. I want to make sure I don't want to ignore any of the comments. DNA cells. Yeah, we gonna get to some of that this evening. We gonna get to some of that. It's people who see me walk and say, you walk like your pop, right? It's people who see me do certain gestures, right? And say, your mom used to do that, right? There are things that I have no control over as far as my appearance, what I look like. Like, I had nothing to do with that. That came from the 23 chromosomes that I inherited from my paternal side, and the 23 chromosomes that I inherited from my maternal side, right? From the matriarch and the patriarch, right? So let's just get to it. See the woman on the screen, right? This is my first godmother, right? She's originally from Texas. As many brothers and sisters did in the 60s and 70s, they came to Detroit to get some of these good paying jobs, right? Let me get this music out of here for a minute or change it. Matter of fact, we just gonna switch it up and no, I don't want that. I really don't want that. We gonna go with that. So, many, even some of our parents came up here from the South to Detroit to work possibly for the big three, and Ford, GM, and Chrysler were not the only well-paying factories here in what back then people called Motown, right? There were other factories in the city of Detroit that paid good, right? So, in particular, it was a pickle jar pickling factory or whatnot, as to where this is where my mom met my first godmother, who's in the picture. You see her holding that big old fish that she caught on her own land down in Baytown, Texas. If any of my cousins from Texas or something like that, if I'm misquoting the town, just let me know. I know Baytown, of course, I know Houston, and Channelview, which is outside of Houston, where I have relatives that stay, right? So, again, her and my mom worked at uh, uh, the pickle jar factory or whatnot, and from my mother's mouth to my ears, one day, her and my first godmama walk into one of the little meeting rooms, and on a chalkboard, they saw depictions of two women with really big breasts with some nigger gibberish wrote up under, on a chalkboard, wrote up under the drawings, the depictions or whatnot. So that was the moment that her and my first godmother quit, and quit that job, and this is right before I was actually born, right? So going they was at the plant in the mid 70s, going into the late 70s, and later I was born, right? So it's a lot. Like, if I was sharing some of my family photo albums from that era, when I'm like 1 going on 2 years old, all of the photos in that book show my mom and her best friend, which was my first godmother. And I say my first godmother because I have multiple women who became my godmothers in my lifetime, right? So, right now, both of my parents have passed over. So there have been some unanswered questions that I've always had about the fact that when I turned 3 years old, my godmother, took me to Texas with her, right? And like a month before my dad passed, he lived with me. So I wanted to ask him these questions about her, right? And what he told me is she kidnapped me, right? And in my mind, I'm like, how does somebody kidnap your child? And why would someone who is supposed to be my godmother, who used to babysit me all the time and things like this and that, why would she kidnap me? Like, these things make no sense, you know? But that's what I was told by way of my father. But me and my mother never had these discussions. So there's some blanks within my life. And I know the average person may not remember things from when they were 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years old. But I have a very good memory, right? I actually remember my first birthday party, right? And a lot of people will be like, "You don't remember your first birthday party," but I figured out the older I got as to why I remembered so much of my early childhood, and it was because of trauma, right? My first birthday, I'm trying to get at the cake and fall out of the chair, and I had two black eyes. My first birthday, right? I distinctly remember this. The things that I can remember from when I was 2 years old, based upon predominantly trauma, right? And I definitely remember everything from the age of 3, 4, 5, and so on, right? But let's get back to the alleged kidnapping and my godmother kidnapping me and taking me to Texas when I was 3 years old. What all of my family, and not even my mother, even though I can remember my mother, like, once she came back to get me when I was 4 years old, I can remember her checking my whole body, literally, right? But regardless to that, a lot of fucked up shit happened to me as a baby in Texas. Things that I've never really discussed with anybody, right? And some things that I'm not going to mention this evening because I don't want to traumatize you all the way that I'm forever traumatized, right? As an example, I'll put somebody on the table who most of the people in the listening audience more than likely are familiar with. Iceberg Slim. Peace God. I was looking at Peace Goddess. I was looking at a documentary about him, and he mentioned how his mom would go to work and drop him off at the babysitter, and the things that the babysitter would do to him, right? And I'm not gonna mention what he said the babysitter would do to him, but and this was, I think, I want to say 2 years ago or close to 2 years ago that I originally saw this documentary, and I mean that shit, it haunted me, right? It literally haunted me. It took me again 2 years to be able. I try not to think about that. I tried to mentally block that shit out of my mind. The same way I attempted to mentally block the things that should never happen to any child that happened to me when I was in Texas, right? Why am I mentioning this? You're gonna find out. Just stick with me, right? So during this particular time, my pop was in prison, right? So I've never blamed my parents for what happened to me when I was down there because, to be completely honest, at one point in time in my life, I thought I kind of figured out as to why my godmother took me to Texas, right? I remember a raid, right? See, this is another thing about me. I cannot recall. I'll just put it to you like this. My entire existence from the age 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up until whenever, I've always knew what cocaine or cocaine was because it was always around. I always knew what cannabis or weed or trees or what some of you call marijuana. I always knew what that was because it was always around. I don't recall a time when it wasn't around. You see what I'm saying? So with that being said, I kind of, me talking to my older brother, and you know what I'm saying, him talking about how he had to hide, things during this raid, and my mom wasn't at home or whatnot, and I put those two and two together, and I kind of always assumed this was the reason that my godmother took me to Texas, right? Because she didn't want CPS to take me, you know? But then I look back and I reflect now, and I'm like, well, they didn't take my two older brothers. None of us have never been in the care of CPS or foster care or anything like that. Then I had to remind myself at the time, although me and my two older brothers, we have the same last name, but we don't have the same father, right? My mother's first husband, I carry his surname. I don't carry the surname of my biological father, right? And my mother was still married at the time. And I do recall at a young age, like weekends and a lot of time during the summers, me and my two older brothers would go and stay with our dad. You know, he had a new girlfriend. We would go and spend a night over her house where he lived at and things like this and that. He never treated me like I wasn't his biological child, even though I wasn't. And it wasn't a secret either. Everybody knows who my dad is, right? And when my dad wasn't locked up, you know, he was in and out of my life. It wasn't a secret, right? So with that being said, I kind of always assumed that that was the reason that she swooped me up and took me down there. But a few years ago, like I said, prior to my pop passing, he stayed with me. So when I brought the conversation up about her and me going down there, he just laughed and was like, Doris kidnapped you and took you down there. And I'm like, the fuck is funny about being kidnapped? Right? You know, I didn't say it to him that way. And at that point, I just kind of, other issues that I was dealing with, you know what I'm saying? So I just kind of left it alone. And again, me attempting to deal with the trauma of the bad shit that happened to me while I was down there is like, I have to reflect on it because it shaped and molded me to be the woman that I am now. There's certain things that I just don't do, right? There's certain behaviors that I guess I can use the word habitual, right? For me, as to how I deal with some of my trauma, burying some of it, not wanting to discuss it. And we all know what can happen when you bury trauma. When you bury trauma, it's embedded. And, you know, at any moment when certain things may happen to you, or you get angry about something, or you get highly emotional about some things, you know, you may just snap. And I had my snap moment that prevents me, for the most part, from snapping, right? Snapping, you know, got me jacked up. Got me a $350,000 bond. I lost cars. I lost a home. I lost a whole lot of shit based off of me reacting, right? It's different when you put yourself in a situation or you start something, right? Or you do something that you had no business doing to a person, place, or thing, and you suffer the consequences of it. This wasn't the situation, and you know what I'm saying, that happened to me. My situation was where you had individuals being disrespectful and continuously asking for it, right? And again, when I finally let it all go and let it all loose, I'm the one who ended up getting in trouble for it. So I just put it like that. So let's go back to Texas. My parents had matching Eldorados. I think they must have been like 76 or 77 Eldorados. The one like Superfly had in 1972, the original movie Superfly, like that, right? So mom eventually drives down there and comes and get me and then brings me back to Detroit, right? So, this is about to be a story for your ass. So, let's rewind. Let's get back to a little bit before or a little bit after I was born. and me talking about how the cocaine was always around or whatnot. And my mother and her homegirl quitting the pickle jar factory or whatnot. They began to hang out with Uncle Charles, which put it like that. My mother's biological sister's husband, right? They began to hang out with him, and he was the key man, right? He was the this is where all the cocaine comes from or whatnot, right? And this is crazy, y'all, but it's 100% facts, so we gonna deal with it. Again, it was always around me, right? So as I grew and got a little bit older, you know what I'm saying? I began to notice a change in lifestyles, right? For me and my brothers and for my mother, right? When you grow up and you have parents that have a lot of money, you notice the type of cars that they drive, right? Cadillacs, Lincolns, Benzes, things like that. You notice that. You live that lifestyle. You're accustomed to going to Fairlane and Northland and getting whatever you want whenever you want it, right? And when that lifestyle changes, and again, you grew up how I grew up, you're gonna fall one or two ways. I always say the gift was the curse and the curse is the gift. But without the curse, you know what I'm saying, or the negative things, I could have fell into some situations because I didn't know better. But being that I had already been exposed to certain things, I knew better. I knew there were going to be some things that I would never do on my lifetime because I already saw it as a toddler, as a youth, as an adolescent. I saw a lot of shit, right? So again, when your parents go from driving all these fancy cars to now they driving a Thunderbird and a fucking Buick, you see what I'm saying? It's like I noticed those things. So I'll say I talk about the uh, crack era sometimes, or maybe more times than maybe some people feel like I should, but it's a reason that I do that. Like by the year of 1980 and 81 and 82, I knew what freebase cocaine was because there was no crack during that time. I knew what it looked like to cook cocaine. I knew all of these things because I was exposed to them. I already knew them. My other godmother, who didn't do any of these things, she married my Uncle Pablo Avila, right? So you're talking about Colombians, you're talking about Dominicans, you're talking about me growing up in a household where I saw all of these people and saw all of these things taking place here in Detroit in the early 80s. Again, before crack, before they called it crack. Again, I was already exposed to it and knew what it was, right? So if you talking about having parents that have substance abuse issues, but not on the level of friends that I grew up with that had parents who had who we would call a crackhead or something like that. You wouldn't look at my mother and say no shit like that. You see what I'm saying? You don't look at people who have diamonds up the ass and real estate up the ass and things like this and that and even think that. You see what I'm saying? You don't look at um melanated people my parents' age who made Christmases for many other families because they could afford to do so. You don't look at their habit in that manner. I'll just put it to you like that. So with that being said, a lot of times my mom would be out of town, right? Most of my life, my before I became an adult, my dad was in other countries doing other things or in prison, one or the other. So that gave way to people to take advantage of me as a child. And these are things that happen that A lot of people don't like to discuss, right? They tell you don't talk about that. You shouldn't talk about that. And let's use logic, y'all. This is what predators. This is we become a people who behave in a predatory manner. When you tell a child not to tell about their abuse, then you're silencing a victim, or you're attempting to silence a victim. And this type of behavior goes back to our parents and our grandparents, right? And they just passed that, it became generational. So the reason that some parents or grandparents would tell a child not to speak about their abuse is because that's what they were told. That's how they function. They were told to pray about it. Which, just fast forward to 2025, right? We talk about the fact that, again, 1 out of every 4 Black women have been SA before the age of 18. And according to statistics, 1 out of every 6 of our melanated men have been SA before the age of 18. And again, the reason that it's been allowed to carry on in that way is because we inherently believe in that. You shouldn't tell your business, or you shouldn't speak about it, or you shouldn't talk about these things, when very well we should be discussing this shit so that we can put an end to it. Which is why, whether we talking about domestic violence, or you talking about children being taken advantage of, these are topics that I touch on a lot because I'm a survivor, right? I'm someone who had, as a child, have if I had voiced this to my biological father, he would probably still be in prison today. You see what I'm saying? There were no pussies. I didn't grow up around no cream puffs or nothing like that. But again, even if we talk about some of these celebrities who, are multimillionaires, those individuals do not get to spend a lot of time, and especially quality time, with their children. So you're leaving your child with caretakers and personal assistants and things like this and that. I grew up the same way. Even when I was in middle school and my mother started to date a truck driver who she eventually married, she was on a road with him. So my mother would leave us at home with caretakers and things of that nature, right? So unbeknownst to her, there were certain things that, and none of these people were doing anything to me like that, but some of their behaviors, some of their habits, I saw, right? I'm seeing adults do things that 10, 11, 12, and 13-year-olds shouldn't be exposed to. See? So, again, whether we're talking about, and imagine the brothers and sisters that I grew up with who had parents who were on Section 8, had parents who had who were severe stone alcoholics or heroin addicts and things like this and that. Imagine the trauma that they now deal with and the type of abuse that they endured as well. You see, so this is what I mean when I say there are still some things to this day that I'm kind of naive about, because I was raised a certain way, right? With a certain amount of stability that maybe somebody else didn't have. But some of them had parental guidance and stability that I didn't have, right? For example, and I was thinking about this earlier today, my youngest nephew, his mother began to be around my mother all the time, right? And she would call my mama Ma. And I remember telling my mama, like, she ain't even been around that long. She be calling you mom. You know what I'm saying? Like, and my mom was like, oh, you jealous. I look, I'm like, I'm not jealous. You know what I'm saying? I'm being realistic. Like, she ain't been around long enough to be calling you ma. Now, I say that to say this. It took me, I'll say, up until the age of 25, I didn't recognize when someone was jealous of me, right? These are some of the things that, again, I was very naive about, and some things I'm probably naive about today. You see what I'm saying? Like, for an example, those of you who we can't do this live on Facebook, I don't know why they won't let me take it off of private or whatnot, but I've been spazzing out on Facebook about my own personal life and things that I face. And I'll say this: I've looked like what I look like my entire life. So as far as the opposite sex giving me a compliment, like, I don't take that as if this man is hitting on me because he says something about what I look like or something about my hair or something like that. I look at it as, okay, whatever. You see what I'm saying? Because I'm accustomed to it. But again, these are some of the things that I may very well still be naive about. And again, I don't look at if it go like this. Like, I'm in a relationship or I'm married, right? And there's certain men who give me compliments on social media. I don't look at it like, okay, this man is complimenting me, so I'm supposed to cuss him out because I'm in a relationship. That don't make sense to me. Now, me entertaining it, some of you will look at it like, well, if you already got a husband or you already got a man and a guy is giving you a compliment, he's being disrespectful to your man, so you should cuss him out. Like, I don't comprehend that. Whether or not it's right or wrong, what I've had to do is seek guidance from the elders about these particular issues that since the age of 30, I'll say, and probably beyond that. But I've been in 2.5 relationships where the men that I was with were very jealous hearted, right? And what do we have? We are having trouble with your Facebook. Well, just take Facebook off. Don't even message me about that string. Fuck Facebook. Take it off. Move it. Bye. Adioso. Peace. Bye. Let me take that down. So, the guys were very, again, jealous hearted, possessive. And for the most part, I'm not incompetent. I realize that these are embedded issues that are embedded within them because, again, I am not, I'm not receptive to compliments as to where I let the conversation carry on and, I become flirtatious with a man and, lead a man outside of my relationship on. But I'm not a man. So I wouldn't know how my spouse feels. I can't feel like a man because I'm not a man. The best that I can do is express the fact that, look, I'm not receptive to any of this. So I don't understand as to why you take issue with it. And if you take issue with it, very well, you shouldn't be taking it out on me, right? What you need to do is, I guess, if you feel like the guy is disrespecting you, that you need to check him. And again, y'all, I don't know everything, and I'm looking for. I've had to seek guidance and advice again from elders, males and females, right? And for the most part, I've gotten the same responses. If I'm not disrespecting my spouse, then he has no reason to be disrespectful towards me. In this arena of what we label edutainment, where yeah, every now and then I'll drop a few bars and make a song. I should be making content on social media more often than what I should. But if I'm with somebody who, you know what I'm saying, is insecure on that type of level, it makes it difficult for me again to have the desire to even want to create content. Because it's like, okay, I create content and I get a bunch of responses, and now you got an attitude with me again. Like, it don't make sense. And for most of us that are my age, if you're in a relationship, whether you've been in a relationship for a year, 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years, you already had a life prior to this relationship, meaning that you have many other people who are in your life of the opposite sex, right? So if I was gonna run around like blocking everybody that I knew in my past and all of that because they like my picture or what, this shit makes, I'm like I said, I'm naive about certain things to a certain degree, such as jealousy. Being that I've never been a jealous type of individual, for, you know what I'm saying? I'm not a jealous type of individual, so it took me decades to be able to, or 2 decades and a half, to even be able to recognize when someone was jealous of me. And again, if I'm not a person who ever carried, that type of negative energy, you know what I'm saying? Then when it's happening, it's very difficult to recognize. So I went through a rough patch of having to figure out who was actually an actual homeboy or actual homegirl, an actual ally or friend, if you will, and who was not, because certain signals I didn't pick up on because none of that shit was embedded in me. I had to have other people tell me, hey, uh, such and such ain't your friend. See what I'm saying? She ain't your friend, or he's no good for you. This person is jealous of you. This person, it took me a long time to comprehend these things again. So with that being said, this caused me to make some mistakes in my lifetime as to where I would be helping somebody who didn't deserve my help. You see what I'm saying? Letting people drive my cars who I shouldn't have let drive my cars, right? Getting people, throwing money their way or customers their way that I shouldn't been, you know what I'm saying? Like, it took me a while to recognize certain things. So the things that I actually do know based off of experience and trial and error, best believe when I say something, I'm 100% sure. If I'm not 100% sure, I'll ask. Or I'll use certain words like allegedly, such and such and such. Because I take honesty very seriously. I take truth very seriously. If you lack the ability to be truthful, then you lack the ability to tell the truth or to be true. You see what I'm saying? And again, in this digital age of technology, people just pick things up and carry them with them. I have many friends out of the what we label the conscious community, even a grassroots conscious community, who, for an example, they promote the flat earth, right? Then I have brothers and sisters from the very same community that say they don't believe in it. That's crazy to even think that, right? I don't have a dog in that fight. And the reason is because admittedly, I do not have the ruler. I don't have the ruler to measure that and say, oh yeah, it's flat. I don't have the tools. I don't have the laboratories. I don't have the type of aircraft. You see what I'm saying? Now, I've been in many airplanes, and I understand the fact that, again, the sun may just be setting somewhere else. And here in Detroit, it's shadow time or nighttime or darkness, as many of you may say, right? So if I don't even argue about the shit, but it's like, to me, okay, if the earth is flat, then how is that possible? You see what I'm saying? But being that, again, I don't have the laboratories, I don't have the lab technicians and scientists and astronauts and anthropologists and archaeologists and so on and so forth to verify anything. And people who are content creators, you can bring the person who has the most doctorates and master degrees in a particular science or curriculum, and they'll still say that that person is wrong and they right. And I don't get in the middle of that shit, because again, I don't have a dog in that particular fight. But when it comes to us talking about childhood trauma, S abuse, y'all know what I mean when I say S abuse and things of that nature, and pedos and all. Oh, I know plenty about that. So these are the things that I'm experienced enough in to not just have a fucking opinion. These are not opinions. Okay? If I go all out, for an example, if you look on this channel now, you'll see a lot of videos where I'm debunking the racist satire about Michelle Obama being born a male, along with Venus and Serena Williams. There's a very reason why I'm so passionate about those particular things. And it goes beyond, because again, as I've stated multiple times, I'm not a fan of Republicans or Democrats. I'm not a fan of Michelle Obama or Barack Obama. I did not vote, excuse me, for Barack Obama. I did not. I'm not a fan of the 2 terms that he served in office in the Oval. I'm not. I'm being honest with you. But there's some things that I know. When we talk about successful, melanated women, educated, wealthy, melanated women being called men, I know the origins of that. The origins of that come directly from the Ku, the Klux, the Klan. They have done that for decades. So fast forwarding now into this current time, when I see our people regurgitating racist satire, which has a source, right? It has a source. And me wanting to be 100% correct on my stance, I did the deep dive and did the research and found out where that information came from and bring it back to the people. And I'll spend so much time, or have spent so much time over the years, rebutting it, right? And proving that it's not true. And then I'll leave it alone. And what do you know? 3, 4, and 5 years later, it'll resurface. So I'm not going to wear myself out on certain topics, certain issues, right? And with that being said, being that I was able to gather the facts, I didn't go pull that woman dress up to look. Understand. Not to understand why certain people push certain agendas that are false. Most times when people do this, they do it based upon the fact that this is what's popular and this is what people was talking about. See what I'm saying? And in order to keep my following or gain more followers or make sure I'm getting that YouTube or that Instagram or that TikTok check, whether or not I know or believe this information to be legitimate or not, I'm going to push that envelope. That's how a lot of people function, unfortunately, which again ruins the credibility of our movement, which for a substantial amount of time now have been stagnated. Not just based upon the fake information, which is one of my main objectives to do away with, as well as ending the gender wars. But when we start talking about S abuse of women and children, when we start talking about the fact that melanated women and children are the most human trafficked beings out here, barring none, right? These are the bigger issues to me. Okay, so let's get back to speaking about the conscious community and how some of these people push information that they know is not true. You see what I'm saying? Or that they erroneously believe is true because this person who they look at as being a scholar said it, right? Not knowing that they had ulterior motives as to why they're pushing this fake information. We have that problem. We have the number one most serious problem that has been a reoccurring issue within knowledge of self, which is the pedophilia, right? Of our generation, we know about Michael Novak. What's Brother Polite name? Real name, right? Then you had his teacher, Dwight York, right? And Yahweh Ben Yahweh. We have a lot of people who violated our women and children. But based off of the fact that these individuals have shared mountains of knowledge with us, it seems that we're willing to overlook the shit or forgive them, which again leaves way for this cycle to continue. So if I have to be the sister that many people hate because I don't call Dwight York Dr. York or Malachi Z York no more, see what I'm saying? I'll take that hit. I'll take it. I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to lose a certain amount of followers every so many months. You see what I'm saying? Because people get mad at me for telling the truth. I over and understand the fact that some of the individuals, or the two individuals that I just named, excuse me, are highly people. A lot of people depended upon them for information. A lot of people depended upon them to lift their spirits. You see what I'm saying? But when we look at Father John and Pastor Pimpin and Reverend Porkchop, their congregations depended upon them to uplift them as well. You see what I'm saying? But behind closed doors, we know for a fact, especially when we're talking about Catholicism and we're talking about the Catholic priest, a priest or whatnot, we know very well that they practice mentorship. I can't say that word because, like, you know for a fact, how many cases throughout your lifetime have you heard where these various Catholic priests were found to be molesting children, predominantly little boys, right? Over the years, we've watched these monsters get away with committing these types of crimes. And for many years, a lot of us was confused as to where, okay, we found out, even in some cases, some of these Catholic priests, which keeping on them for right now, admitted to committing these crimes and never did a day in jail, right? Not one day in jail. So 2009 is when I found out about, and I was trying to, a piece of my brother irritated Genie. I was trying to ask him, was he familiar with something known as the ecclesiastical clause? Again, the ecclesiastical clause. This is what these priests were using in order to be forgiven and not do prison time, right? Again, it's called an ecclesiastical clause, and then they have another name, uh, ecclesiastical law. You usually, when you hear something like that, the first thing you think about is the Helios Biblios or King James version of the Bible. But I'm telling you, within federal, state, and local government, this is a particular clause that these Catholic priests have been using for decades or centuries. You see what I'm saying? I'm trying to share some of the comments, but this is stuff that, again, we have to talk, not just discuss, but we have to become proactive with ending this. Because again, this is something else that I touch on pretty often. When you talk to some of these young men who consider themselves to be LMNOTPQFU, over, I, I would go as far as to say over 100%. But I can say 100% of the ones who I wow, I hate to hear that. I hate to hear that. I hate to hear that. I followed Dwight York since 1991. As a youth, I was already what got me to really follow him was Pale Man in the Bible. A lot of people, when it comes to his first version of his book Leviathan, because he did 1,000 of them. Like, these are books that, as a baby, really captivated, and garnered my attention, right? Especially when I was in Florida, staying where I was staying at, attending a 4% non-white school. You see what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I say what it is. My mind was gone. But let's get back to the ecclesiastical clause and all of this and all of that. Like, just imagine they're allowing these people to get away with these things. You see what I'm saying? So, again, me being introduced to this type of knowledge at such a young age, when somebody asked me a question on Facebook earlier, and I was telling them, the reason I was voicing what I was voicing, because they was like, well, why would somebody, for example, when I talk shit about Donald Trump, the first thing people allege is that, well, you one of them Democrats, right? Which is not the case. Or they'll say, well, you one of them liberal uh, feminists who follow the white women feminists, which is false as well. Why I can't stand on what we all need to be standing on, and when I'm right, and you don't have, what I'm saying, you don't have a way to dismantle or rebut what I say, you want to call me names. Okay, you want to call me names, right? Because you know I'm right. Don't call me names and don't make stupid ass assumptions. Don't pretend as if it was only the Democrats who pushed the eugenics agenda. Don't try to act like it wasn't no Republicans involved in that, huh? Or people who voted Republicans, or politicians who were of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It seems to be that they both agreed with eugenics. So please do not play them games with me. I'm not a baby, right? At all. None. It's the same way when we talk about the NAACP, being started and funded by way of the Yiddish Ashkenazi Khazarian. You know what I'm saying? Y'all know what I'm trying to say and what I'm not trying to say. If you got knowledge of self, when I say Yiddish, Khazarian, Ashkenazi, you know what I'm talking about already, right? And again, I can back up and go back to Dwight York, because the first time I ever heard those words that I just used was in that Pale Man in the Bible. You see what I'm saying? In the books and the lectures that he did on that particular topic or whatnot. But again, like I just said, you have ministers and bishops and deacons and priests and who have uplifted people for fucking decades, but at the same time, behind closed doors, deserve to have their lives taken away from them for the crimes that they committed on babies. So just because somebody has an abundance of knowledge, and to you they may seem to be sincere, they might just be a fucking demon. I'm gonna just say what it is. So this also, we could also use this same knowledge or scenario when it comes to various so-called scholars within the realm of knowledge itself, right? And I'm kind of going fast a little bit. So I went back to Dr. York. So when I say certain things about Hebrew Israelites, or certain things about my brothers and sisters who deal with Islam, you see what I'm saying? I'm saying it from an area of experience, because once upon a time, I was a Hebrew Israelite. I was a Hebrew Israelite longer than I was into Islam. You see what I'm saying? So things that happen behind closed doors, I'm not going to say when I was in it that I was aware of it. But as certain people came out and began to make claims or confess certain things, I have to go back in my mental log and replay things in my head. And okay, that's why that brother disappeared for a minute. Or that's why, they had such close relationships with this grown man or grown woman when they were children. You see what I'm saying? Because they was doing shit to them babies they had no business doing. Right? Certain things you can reflect on that you may have been blinded to when they were actually happening. Although you didn't see it with your own eyes, but now when you go back and you're trying to kind of peep the behavior as to once upon a time those children were okay with being around that particular man or woman, and you notice a time in life as to where those children would cry. You know what I'm saying? In the presence of a Dwight York and certain people, and beg their parents not to make them go with them or be around them. Yes, this shit was happening. This shit was happening, y'all. Do you know how rare it is for a child to lie and say an adult assaulted them, that's not that's very rare, almost zero. All right, I'm not saying it's never happened, but for the most part, a child has to build up the courage to even say some things. Like, I'm not going to even say make an accusation, because like I said, most times the shit be true, right? As to where later on in life, right? Like, for example, I don't know if y'all up on this guy Jason Blunt out of Jacksonville, Florida. This guy who was a serial rapist. Let me see. Can we agree that certain events are meant to take place in order for a divine agenda to interfere? Um, I mean, I'm like 50-50 with that, because, and I'm gonna tell you why. It's like me closing my eyes and praying and expecting for a situation to change. You know what I'm saying? Like, certain stuff, I don't really, I'm not against metaphysics and the various this, that, and the third or whatnot, but I know things work out better when we take the shit into our own hands and hold people accountable, right? That way they know. See what I'm saying? That if they ever do anything again, they gonna have to face me, you, and every the fuck body else who came and put it on them. Versus me. Now, don't get me wrong. I have a shrine. I have an altar with my ancestors on it. You see what I'm saying? And occasionally, I ask, you know, you know what I'm saying? Help guide me, send me some lotto, things like that. What I don't do is I don't go to my ancestors asking them to do harm to anyone or anything. I'm more secure with me taking those things into my own hands and taking care of it. Now, with that said, I don't I'm not against, hey, utilize all available weapons. That's my motto. Utilize all available weapons. So I'm not anti, I won't say that. Do your thing. I'm not anti. But again, what resonates with me more and what works for me more is me handling my business. Right? Me not letting shit slide. So let me get back to where I was at to see if the people are aware. There's this guy out of Jacksonville, Florida, who is a serial rapist, right? And I want to put this sucker face on the screen. Where am I? Let me see. Let me see. We about to put him all the way on blast. Come on, not play with me. It's taking a minute to load up, y'all, but okay. Okay, I got him. I gotcha. That ain't his picture. Oh, my bad. I'm looking at the wrong screen. Here we go. So this is the guy right here. If you're not aware, I listen to AM radio. So all I hear is news all day. When I'm navigating, when I'm inside of my car or whatnot, I listen to AM radio. So I hear, mostly news all day until I put some music on or whatnot. But this surprised me. I don't. How many victims? They don't even know how many victims. That's how many victims there is. So with that being said, I'm willing to bet, and that's what I skipped over when I was talking about the young men who are LMNOTPQFU, and the young women, most of them, most of them were essayed as children. And I'm willing to bet, just like a lot of the pimps back in the day, many of them were taken advantage of as children. You see what I'm saying? And they parents, predominantly, a lot of them put the blame on their mothers. So they grew up with this hate and disdain for women. The same thing with some of our women who are in that rainbow lifestyle, were sexually abused. You see what I'm saying? As children, and they hold this hate and disdain for men based off of it. And again, this is not to say that, which I know for a fact, because I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I'm not rainbowing. You see what I'm saying? And there were things that happened to me as a child. I don't blame all men for what happened to me as a child. You see what I'm saying? We can't do that. But a lot of people need therapy. I'll just put it that way. Some of us aren't able to self-heal, if you will. You understand? And some people are so mentally unstable as to where they don't recognize that what happened to them was wrong, but they feel like it must not have been wrong because nobody ever told them what was done to them was wrong. They was told to shut the fuck up about it and don't speak about it again and don't mention it again. You see what I'm saying? So in turn, they grow up to be the same type of predator that violated them. So again, what I'm saying to us is that we have to definitely put an end to the cycle. We have to spend much more time with our children, right? For real. As opposed to being more concerned about, and it's unfortunate, but in most of these cases, it's a matter of parents attempting to be financially stable and secure a college fund for their babies and things like this and that. And they sacrifice raising the babies and protecting the babies because you're leaving them to go do a double shift in 16 hours and 12 hours. Or maybe, again, maybe you're in the music industry and, you know, you're doing 6-month tours out the year. Maybe you're a truck driver and you're only home 2 or 3 days out of the week, if that much. You see what I'm saying? We, as used to be a village, used to be a community. Now we're just a neighborhood, is what most people say. But we have to start looking out for each other a whole lot more. Like on the 4th of July, for an example, I was in my neighborhood at the little park hanging out with my family and my peeps. And I noticed it's a little baby. He might be 2 years old. He got a little remote control car. He playing with the remote control car. But you know how they have a park and they have the big rocks that go around the park? He's on the outside of the rocks. He's playing on the rock and then he's coming towards the street where all the cars was parked. So when I peeped him, I just stood there and I kept telling him, no, baby, go back that way, go back that way. So you got the guys, they out with their vets. You got the girls twerking and everything like this and that is going on. And I asked one of the young ladies, I said, y'all know who baby this is? And they said, no, we thought it was your baby. I'm like, no, it's not my baby. So I went to the DJ booth and I asked the young lady on the mic to ask who child it was. And lo and behold, it's the woman with the blue hair. It's her baby. And she says, that's my son. That's my son. And, She turns to me and she says, well, he's antisocial. So he don't want to play with the other kids. That's why he over there. And her back was to him. You see what I'm saying? But she had to turn and face me to see him and see me and talk to me. Do you know she turned her back around and had her back to her child? So at this point, I'm pissed off, right? Because he's actually not in the inside of the park where she is. She's like, I don't know how many hundreds of feet away from her 2-year-old. You see what I'm saying? So what I did is I tapped the young twerking girls. I said, hey, I'm getting ready to leave. I need y'all to, I said, the boy mother is the lady over there with the blue hair. You know what I'm saying? They was like, say no more. They went over there and told her, like, look, we about to dip. And I skipped over the part. I actually started talking to the girls because one of the girls had a little poodle. And the baby was trying to pet the poodle. So as the poodle rose up, he got scared. So one of the little young ladies was like, "No, he not gonna bite you. He not gonna bite you." So long story short, when I said that to them, they was like, "Say no more," and they went over their tour. What was said doesn't need to be repeated on YouTube. You see what I'm saying? And at that point, the lady started acting like it was her baby, right? So I turned to the young women when they came back towards the cars or whatnot, towards the street. I was just like, thank you. And I went home after. So I'm just using that as an example. That entire time, like literally, I was standing around that baby, not letting him go towards the street for close to an hour. That's why the young women who didn't know me thought that the child was mine. But my point was this. What if I was a predator? I could have picked that baby up and ran with him and his mama wouldn't even fucking know. Not to mention, I want to say it had to be 2020. Uh, a child was hit on that same street on Elmira because of the same shit. You got a 2-year-old out here and you so busy jocking the guys with the nice cars and twerking your ass as to where you're not watching your baby. These are, again, this is what I mean by us going back and to certain tradition or culture, if you will. Things like a rites of passage, right? Certain things, what she did, if a woman behaved that way during my grandparents' time, she would have got her ass whipped probably 5, 10 times, right? But then things were different then. That was a time as to where if something like that, if a mother was busy, we'll just say, then every elder and teenager is responsible for the younger babies, to watch the younger babies while what the mother is, picking peaches, or what I'm saying, farming, or doing some agriculture type of things or whatnot. Then automatically, it wasn't a situation where the mother would have to say, well, I'm going to do some gardening, or I'm going to fish, or whatever it is. We automatically got that child, and nothing is going to happen to that child. But in today's age, when all of the traditions that we have are modern Eurasian or European traditions, it's like all of that ancient stuff that we have amnesia about is like most of us don't even know about any of this shit. Most of us don't realize that the entire neighborhood is responsible for the babies, right? The entire neighborhood or community holds that as first priority. that our children are never in harm's way. Somewhere along the way, whether y'all want to say it happened during slavery or whenever, we lost that. And this is the reason that we have the abundance of issues that we have today. And I'm not saying in every situation that we're at fault, but we have to hold some of the accountability of it, because essentially it does begin with us. It doesn't begin based upon what the so-called slave masters, the European ones, were doing, right? Because our history doesn't start there. We existed before that and after that. We've made a comeback as a people multiple times, as far as having ownership of our communities, as well as having various businesses or brands, if you will. And we will overcome again. This is nowhere near being the end for us, right? But if we don't begin to make certain corrections, right? And know that we stand on a strong foundation. A lot of people, you hear a lot of people say, well, I'm self-made and blah, 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 as if they didn't have any help or any assistance. They don't pay homage or give credit to those who sacrifice for us. So I'm always here as a reminder of these things, as to where, again, we have to pay homage and show respect where it's due. And with that being said, again, as adults who may enjoy social media, you may even make money on social media, but you also need to be accountable for the content that you share, right? Because it's not just affecting people who may potentially see what you produce, but they're also underage or young adults and teenagers and adolescents paying attention to this information. And certain things, especially false information, don't need to be in any of our psyche, right? And really, overall, without me even going through my entire life, that's going to take time for me to do, right? Because it's been a lot. It's been a lot. Wow. Imagine being 11 years old and knowing what a lot lizard is. Do y'all know what a lot lizard is? I'm saying, I know some adult people right now who never even heard of the term lot lizard. But again, in the 5th and 6th grade, I knew what a lot lizard was. And that just goes to show how much I was exposed to as a child. So, with me knowing that, again, I need us to not just think like a village, but perform as one. That way, we have less of the rainbow activity. You see what I'm saying? We have less of the abuse that takes place with our babies. I'll give you another example. Then I'm gonna be out of here. My in-laws, can I say my in-laws? I'll just say a cousin of mine that graduated high school at 16, grew up to be a psychologist, a child psychologist, right? Was in the field of as a pediatric doctor originally, and blah blah blah. So with her going to college for these things or whatever, being a little bit older than me, she will always, whenever she saw me, she always taught me some things. I just put it that way. You know what I'm saying? Her college course books and things like that I had access to, but she would tell me things like, you should never yell at children because of this, that, and the third. And as I got older, I always said I would never whip my children, right? Said that was some slavery shit. So when somebody say spare the rod, spoil the child, I know that you did not get a uh Strong's concordance, Hebrew Greek concordance when you was reading our Bible, so you want to understand what the fuck they meant when they said spread a rod, spoil the child. They was not talking about beating a child when they said that. Okay. So like a lot of people, it's a lot of people that don't believe in whooping kids, right? Make them stand in the corner, put their foot up, or put them on punishment, take their phone, take their video games, things like this, and they can't go outside and stuff like that, right? This was the type of parent that I strive to be. I don't believe in beating children, right? Even with me having all of that knowledge, my son is 16. He's gotten 2 whippings his entire lifetime from his mother, who don't believe in whooping children. So I understand that your buttons can be pushed. You can be so angered that you may react in a particular way and be angered. But when it comes to babies or children, violence should never be an answer. We should never, ever, especially like I say, they say sport a ride, spare a ride, sport a child, right? And the way it was interpreted was wrong, right? You talking about field dwellers and goat herders and things like this and that carry the rod. So you're supposed to take your child through the rites of passage and give them that knowledge, right? So in other words, if I don't get that child this rod, that knowledge, he not gonna know how to be a goat herder and so on and so forth, right? So he not gonna know how to, sustain without me. He's gonna always need me. That's what the fuck they meant in the Bible when they said spare the rod, spoil. They wasn't talking about beating children. Crazy. I just had to say that. And again, I know some kids do some crazy stuff, right? Some crazy, crazy stuff. But again, if you can show them a better way, that's always going to be the better route. A lot of people will say, me getting my ass whooped is the reason I'm a good person today. Me, I beg to differ. I know many people who got the shit kicked out their ass as children and turned out to be alcoholics and crackheads and thieves and so on and so forth. So getting your ass whooped is not what that instilled fear in you, as to where, yeah, not to repeat that same mistake that you got a whipping for, right? But it don't mean that you have to be beat. There are other ways, again, to discipline, right? Various other ways to discipline. And then sometimes, how they say, you have to bump your head in order to learn. Instead of somebody saving you every time you about to bump your head, somebody pull your shit back. Sometimes you gotta bump your head in order to learn. It just is what it is. What you say? Hold on. What you? Let me see. You say they essential workers. Oh man. Right. Well, you know what I'm saying. Based on again, and I say this, with all humility. Um, I ain't gonna say that because I don't want to give credit to people who don't necessarily deserve credit. But during my early stages of knowledge of self, I learned a lot, and I even learned a lot from, excuse me, people who were scammers, people who were no good. But as I grew, I understood that most of, if 99% of the things that I learned from certain individuals is knowledge I could have got on my own because I could have read the same book that they read, right? But if they don't tell you that they getting this book, I mean, this information from this particular author, you see what I'm saying? Or this particular manuscript or whatever it is, then you looking up at them like they just a fucking genius. When again, you could have got that knowledge on your own. And this is overall what, it ain't a matter of, oh, that's what I learned or the conclusion that I came to. But that's just what it is. Those are the actual facts. This is no way to really sugarcoat stuff, but we try to stay within the community standard guidelines or whatnot that they, which y'all know I did very well tonight. I don't usually have this much. It's not that I don't have control, but I don't have a desire to censor myself. Typically, I usually just go in and be like, if they gonna give me a strike or take the video down or whatever they gonna do is what they gonna do. I don't care because the message is more important. I'd rather people focus on the messenger. I mean the message, not the messenger. You focus on me again. I'm gonna put my one little meme up before we die. This is very vital. Come on. That's crazy. I just saw it. I don't know why. You know what? How about if I do that? Just pop it. No. Yeah, if I tried to just do an hour, y'all, I ain't even plug my chair up or none of that. But I don't know. We get to going in and hard to stop the flow. Stop doing that. And I got it this time. So again, someone who shares this type of meme 40, 50 times a year, how can you call them a Democrat or a liberal because they be dragging y'all boy Trump? Answer me that. So this is why people hurl insults in my direction because you don't have nowhere. You don't have a credible rebuttal to come at me with when I show you this, right? Because most people who deal with knowledge of self will say, well, the Democrats was the original KKK. Okay, nigga, how about right now? You got neo-Nazi skinhead Klansmen on both sides. You know what I'm saying? In the Democratic arena, or the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, as well as in all realms of politics and law, they exist, or law enforcement, if you will. They exist on both sides. So it's very asinine for you to try to use, for you to go back in time during the Reconstruction era and talk to me about how so-called black people were Republicans in order for you to justify the the Trump nut hugging that you doing. And again, I tried to say this last time. I over and understand what the elders are telling me. They want Trump to do all the most racist stuff that he can in order to push us into the hole so we don't have any other choice but to come together as a people and rise. Like, I love my elders. And again, I understand what they saying, but we already been through that. Like, we don't need another person to take away another politician or president, if you will, to take away all the gains that we've had in order to force us to come together. I don't, you know, I just, it's not that I have to be right and I think I'm right all the time. The facts are there. We've already been pushed to the brink of no return. We did not need a Biden or Trump or Bush or Obama or none or Reagan. You know what I'm saying? Nixon, Kennedy, Lincoln, Washington, Adams, Jefferson. We didn't need any of them to treat us so bad that it forced us to come together and put down our differences and our ideologies and our theologies in order to force us to come together. I don't think that that's a viable resolution. I love y'all, but I just don't. And again, I always say, yeah, I mean, y'all already know. I feel as though we need to stop doing business with these people, period. Because again, USA Inc. is the largest, wealthiest cartel, corporation, country, nation, whatever the hell you want to call it, in the world, barring none. But thus, we don't have the largest population of people. But thus, we have the largest amount of people incarcerated. But thus, we have the largest amount of people who own firearms, barring no other country or nation state, if you will. So for me, the only solution that makes sense to me is for us to stop doing business with them by way of not just, I'm not gonna get on here and just tell y'all, oh, don't vote and your vote don't count and blah blah blah. No, I'm talking about shit like we say we say some people use the term tax exemption, some of us say a non-obligation and whatnot, right? How about that? How about until they begin to pay, and this Evans, is it Evanston or Evansville in Illinois is where they are paying the people reparations? I know maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, I did multiple videos. I actually did a video where I named all of the cities who are currently paying reparations to some of their so-called citizens or Evanston, thank you, or residents or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? But until they balance the books and cut the checks on a federal level, we need to be withdrawing in every way possible. Hear me. That would, on an international basis, other nations would see that, right? And on a national level, it would force them to change their strategy, right? On a large scale. The things that I used to talk about all the time, like no more click of the ticket and so on and so forth. Us getting their hands out of our pockets on a permanent basis. Again, even after They balance the books by way of cutting the checks. We need to still move as our own people, as a starving people, as we should, right? As we were before the invasion, right? Because it wasn't, it was definitely an invasion. Granted, some of these Eurasians came here to work. Today we call that indentured servitude. How you say that? Indentured servants. But you call the melanated people slaves. Bananas and donuts. So I'm trying to figure out, as far as a guest host who we should have up next. I would like to have Irritated Genie come again and do another bill with us, which that's gonna happen anyway. But in the meantime, in between time, if it's somebody in particular that y'all want to see on here, put it in the chat. I know I got some local people. When I say local, they national and international to some people, but they local to me because they from Detroit. I'm not biased. A lot of brothers and sisters who are a part of the same clans that I'm a part of, they still have certain biases that I don't have. Like, I build with brothers and sisters that are Pan Africans. I build with brothers and sisters that are Islamic. I build with brothers and sisters that are Hebrew Israelites, and all the way around, because once upon a time I was all of the above. And we have, not that we have similar agendas, well, not just because of that, but they don't have the biases that some of their contemporaries have, right? As to where, we don't mess with them brothers and sisters over there because they say they not African and they indigenous to the Americas and they shitting on the Pan Africans. You know what I'm saying? To me, all of that shows a certain amount of incompetence, because if you read the ticker at the bottom of the screen, this has been my motto for 21 years now. So if what the ticker says is true, then how can I be anti towards the brothers and sisters in what we call a Kibulan? If I say that we was everywhere first and we predate all the other people, especially the people, you carry recessive genes, you got recessive genes, you can't predate us anyway. So when I hear some of my brothers and sisters who still deal with them, this Aboriginal autochthonous American movement, right? By way of them researching their bloodline and finding out that they have a firm foot on this land by way of blood, but then they'll turn around and, talk shit about the Pan Africans and everybody else. I know that you haven't reached the plateau of knowledge of self that you need to reach. You see? Again, if we say we the most ancient and we the oldest people on the earth and blah, 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 it makes no sense for you to be running around pointing out all of the other nations, talking about what you is and what you ain't. If we made them, if we begat, like the Bible said, you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't do none of that. I've been where you at already. Definitely. Or division. Just like when I When I use the word black sometimes, and my brothers and sisters, you know what I'm saying, out of the paradigm of Moor or the Moorish paradigm, get mad at me and start talking shit, it's like, hold on. Most of y'all know that I was in the Moorish science before you were. And that's not a knock or a diss to anybody. But I learned how much division is caused by way of you calling yourself chastising another brother or sister for using the word black when we're building. I'm not talking about, again, when you're dealing with local, state, federal entities using the word black. Of course, you don't use it then, because then you fall up under the color of law and deprivation of rights under the color of law and colorable, fake shit. Star man, all this and all that. I know all this information. Is what I stand on. It's my very foundation. But again, you can't chastise me because you're not going to stop me from using that word. It ain't the word that's the problem. It's the invaders that are the fucking problem. Not the word black. It's not the fucking problem. Some people would say, well, legalese is the problem. I say legalese ain't the problem. It's the fact that people don't study and people are lazy, right? But I will say that the bar association is the problem. Not necessarily the word. The barristers, the esquire. I say that their God, when they say in God we trust, some people say guns, oil, and drugs. Some people say gold, oil, and drugs. Some people say what it is, governmental ordinance department, right? That's the God that they believe in. The God that we have to believe in is self. Self. You, me, him, her, the ancestors. If we gonna do belief, it shouldn't go beyond self. So that's where we at with it, y'all. That's where we at. We gonna have to do a part 2 to come back and talk about, you know, more of the self reflection on my end. Because, like I said, admittedly, there are still some things that I'm a bit naive to because they're not things that are embedded within me. I'm like real, for the most part, introvert. Like I stay to myself for the most part. When most people see me, I be with me. Funny. Real funny style, if you want to call it. I like things a certain way. And it seems to be when you bring other people into the picture, of course, they're going to have their own ways of life. And if they conflict with what's best for us as a whole, then those are the people that need to be immediately eliminated from the circle. And not from my point of view, but again, for the salvation of us all, we have to do away with most of the things that I touched on this evening, right? Starting with the pseudo misinformation, the racist satire that You Oreos is running around here regurgitating. You greedy bastards that only care about a following and a YouTube check is out here regurgitating. And you scammers is out here regurgitating in order to scam people. Very disingenuous. Very much going against the grain of progress with your fuckery. Oh man, so I ain't gonna hold y'all no longer. I appreciate everybody who tuned in. And if we gotta do this again tomorrow, we do it again tomorrow. For sure. Yes, we will. And again, I don't see no suggestions about the next guest as I scroll the comment section. No. So it ain't the big three, it's just Big Me and my Kendrick Lamar voice. But for sure, we gonna definitely have the brother Irritated Genie come on here again. My guy. I like what he stand on. You know, we only had conflict about two things: the word nigga or niggas and the tattoos. And I don't even have a tattoo, but I know, you know what I'm saying? That's some ancient king that just came back, and I would say the worst kind of way, because the same way, like me and him agreed upon, like most people who walking around here with locks don't got no knowledge. For them, that's a style, it's a fad, it's a trend, and it's the same thing with the tattoos. So until we ready to get into this again, I'm gonna say peace.
Supreme.
Shock.
They say I'm dope, I said I'm smoke, fire, blowing air, carbon, earth, solid, water, wet. I'm steady beat, a sister soldier that dies effects. So gone with all that hoopla, I'm rah-rah. Unless you talking about Atun, Namuna, Amara, pineal glands, all see your eyes. We call the third eye, we came to build, not pay your bill. Sling 'em in the municipality, city seals like roadkill, descendants of ancient mound builders. Not supposed to need encyclopedias, genetically encoded with 720. We got amnesia, claiming we Christian cretins in love with Yahweh, Muhammad, and Jesus. But you was living inside of God when you was a fetus. But believers and never believers, non-believers, cause we don't be lying, shaking hands and taking